play Yu-Gi-Oh! In this economy? So basically, we're going to be talking about an introduction to economics, utilizing the buying and selling of trading cards to illustrate those concepts. So first off, allow us to introduce ourselves. I'm Tim Kainsbauer. I have a bachelor's degree in gaming and simulation. I'm an official Konami judge for Yu-Gi-Oh! Sanctioned events, and I'm also a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. And to my right, we have the lovely...
I'm Rachel Robbins. I am a budget Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. I have a couple of decks made, and I play a lot of games.
So, and a lot of that goes into understanding this. You'll be surprised how much you inherently already know about this without actually being able to vocalize it. It's very just inherent and within a lot of game environments that economics really plays a role, and you don't really realize it and that you're utilizing it until you have it pointed out, and you'll have that aha moment. So we have some objectives today, what we're going to try to cover for you guys.
And some of those objectives are to understand what an economy is and how economics works, and to understand what a metagame is and how it can help create a simulated economy. The next thing is going to be to understand the economic fundamentals of supply and demand, opportunity costs, scarcity, incentives, purchasing power, and how these concepts influence the Yu-Gi-Oh! Single secondary game, and also to apply this knowledge to building a deck.
It's gonna be more focused on the economic fundamentals, and then because a lot of that is if you grasp that understanding, it's going to help you however you decide to build your deck if you want to, and that's gonna be more personalized that process. So we're gonna get some terms and information, the introductory information, to understand the rest of it. So to start, what is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game? So we're going to abbreviate Yu-Gi-Oh! as YGO and trading card game as TCG. That's what we're talking about. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is the Western version of the Japanese collectible card game developed and published by Konami, based on the fictional game played in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga and anime that was created by Kazuki Takahashi. Now in Asia and Eastern regions of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, instead of trading card games as the OCG, the official card game, they have different formats than us. They often get different product releases at different times than us, and sometimes we get, in the TCG, we'll get our own exclusives that they get later, so they're not really entirely parallel to each other, which is why we distinguish between the two. The only time you have interplay between the trading card game and the official card game is during World Championships once a year. So the game was launched in Japan in 1999 and in North America in 2002. It's the top-selling trading card game in the world. And there have been over 20,000 different cards, like between Blue Eyes Red Dragon and Dark Magician. I'm not talking about actual individual pieces of cardboard. Stuff like that have been released for TCG. So there's practically infinite ways you can build your deck. It was named the top-selling trading card game in the world by Guinness World Records in 2009, having sold over 22 billion cards worldwide. And as of March 31st, 2011, Konami Visual Entertainment of Japan sold 25.2 billion cards globally since 1999. Now, can everyone hear me all right? Because I know I keep kind of drifting away from the microphone. Okay, cool. Just a real fun fact with that, a lot of people will be like, well, that doesn't sound right as Yu-Gi-Oh! Being like the top thing. Globally, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is number one. If you look at North America and Europe, Magic is actually number one in those regions specifically, but if you look worldwide, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the number one. By how it's sold. Yes. Yes. Okay, why don't you tell me?
Alright, so it's an economy. An economy is basically the structured conditions of an economic life in a country, or area, or period where it's defined. And we're going to specifically relate this to production, distribution, and consumption of the services associated with Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's a system especially of interaction and exchange, which we'll go over in a second. And economics is defined by Yu-Gi-Oh! As a social science concerned chiefly with the description and analysis of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So what this means for us is that when in reference to society, it's talking about like the teaching community as a whole. Production refers to Konami's manufacturing of sealed products, so that's what you might find in GameStop, for example. They do some trading cards there.
Your local card shop.
Right. Lots of places, yes. And distribution refers to the sale of the sealed product in that secondary market. The goods, well, they're the cards themselves, which is obvious, and that's either sealed product or individual cards you buy on tcgplayer.com or anywhere else where you can get individual cards. Interaction and exchange, buying, selling, trading the product.
You also get interaction from actual gameplay tools, which we're going to go into this.
Right, and so all of these interactions in society can be looked at as an interpersonal relationship. So trades, transactions, sharing information, Yu-Gi takers and viewers, or game and match between players.
Yeah, you have that interpersonal relationship between all that, and that's what really makes it a social science, which also is more evidence that it has its own economy. Okay, so what is a metagame? Metagame is any approach to a game that transcends or operates outside of the prescribed rules of the game. It uses external factors to affect the game or goes beyond the supposed limits or requirements set by it. In other words, it's a game about the game. So, specifically to our situation, it's operating on knowledge of the current strategic trends within the game. Some notable examples of this in different game types. In tabletop RPGs, any information that a player knows that their in-game character does not know is considered meta-knowledge. And that can affect the way the player chooses to play. If it does affect their choice, then that player is metagame, as they are operating outside of the game and using external factors. In this case, information to determine their approach to the game. In shooters, using certain weapons on particular maps, because of their effectiveness on said maps, such as using a shotgun on a more smaller confined map, would also be metagame. Using knowledge of the actual rules of the game to create your own rules. Like, I'm going to play this weapon on this chemical because it works better. That type of thing. In the same way with Yu-Gi-Oh! We have, I'm going to play these cards at this deck because currently in the competitive atmosphere, this kills what is meta right now. In fighting games, you have character selection where each character has strengths and weaknesses that can be avoided or exploited, depending upon the opposing character. The idea of a good or bad matchup is an example of metagame. So, with Yu-Gi-Oh! And other trading card games, players compete with decks they build for events using outside knowledge of recent tournament representation, results, and matchups. This outside knowledge is what makes up the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame, which is constantly changing. When the top meta decks and tech strategies become developed into an easily identifiable form, this is what's known as a format. If we want to look at this graph right here, which I have courtesy of Simo on YouTube, very great YouTuber with a lot of followers. He gives a lot of good information on the current meta. I did get his permission to use this. This shows the top cut, so the people who got the top, I think 64 or 48 at YCS Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series belong. Well, with YCSs, it's still dependent upon how many people participated in the event. So if they didn't have as high numbers, it wouldn't necessarily be top 64. But, so you can see from it that we are in a pretty well-defined format currently, because we haven't really had a shift since YCS Milan, where Sky Striker and Thunder Dragons are considered the top two decks, purely by representation and how well they perform, with Altergeist being close to. These things I'm saying are specifically archetypes, they're not, each of those decks is exactly the same. What that means is Sky Striker, they are using Sky Striker cards, but they built the deck to function how they wanted it to work. Same thing with Thunder Dragon, we use Thunder Dragon cards. And if anyone is curious about how some of that might look, we have a couple of our own sample decks here at the end of the panel. I'll really gladly show you how you have archetype-specific cards, and then you have the stuff that tech cards and support cards and stuff like that. But to move on, for example, we had the Trickstar Sky Striker format, which came about because of changes in terms of policy and mechanics, because of doing the time rules, new products, and a competitive event. These are all things that also influence the prices, which is what we'll get into with the economic concepts, because of the shifts. So to move on, I feel like I've spent plenty of time on that.
So we're going to move on to metagaming and simulated economy. So this meta-knowledge, it can create a kind of perceived value, and this perceived value can lead to traits of the economy, which we just went over prior, that it's structured and that there's interaction or exchange of goods and services. Some examples of these are going to be like World of Warcraft and the auction house, Pokemon trading. And what we mean by Pokemon trading is specifically not relating to the card game, but actually relating to the game, and they can be looked at as a good.
Yeah, where competitive Pokemon for battling can be looked at as a goods with the better IVs, the better EVs. It's just stats. The better stats will be considered more valuable, and thus will get a more valuable Pokemon in return. That hence you have the value shifting because of their meta.
And then of course trading card secondary cards.
Okay, so what is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Single secondary market? No, it's not that. When we say the Yu-Gi-Oh! Single secondary market, what we're talking about is the economy itself that we're going to discuss. The various markets where unsealed products are sold. That's what makes it the secondary market. The primary market is the sealed product that you would get from a game store or a Walmart. You open that up, you get the valuable cards out of that, and you go to resell them. When they're resold, that's the secondary market. It's where unsealed products are sold, such as TCGplayer.com, Troll and Toad, eBay or Amazon. Those websites are usually places, and some card shops will sell singles as well. So just to give you an idea, so that you know how rare certain rarities of cards are to determine where they get their perceived value from. We're going to talk real quick about the rarities and ratios of a basic booster box of Yu-Gi-Oh! So a 100 card core booster set contains 24 packs per box, with each box including 18 super rares, 4 ultra rare, 18 super rares, 4 ultra rares, and 2 secret rares, with the rest being commons. Whereas you're only getting that amount from the full set, where you have the each individual printing being, when it says 100 card core booster set, does anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that means that there are 100 possible cards you can get. 48 commons, 20 rares, 14 super rares, 2 ultra rares, and 7 rares. You're only going to get 2 of those from a full box of 24 packs. That's what I'm talking about. And different cards of each rarity are randomized evenly if you don't take into account short printings, which Konami likes to do to drive up demand for their product. Where there'll be a really good card, and you might only be able to find it in 1 out of every 8 boxes. And then you need 3 of them, so screw you, right?
We've all been there in Sky Striker.
Okay, so economic concept. Why don't you talk about wants and resources?
Yeah, these are the wants and needs that are really virtually unlimited in these resources. You need them to satisfy wants and needs. You really are forced to choose which desires you want to satisfy, because at the end of the day, we can't have all of our wants months and minutes. The main thing that we're going to focus on is efficiency. Efficiency is achieving goals while minimizing the amount of resources needed, because that's what you need in your deck, or your deck building, that kind of efficiency. So there is a difference between casual and competitive play. I consider myself a casual player, at least at the moment, whereas team plays competitive. But it just depends on how casual you want to be, how competitive you want to be. Do you want to compete with your friends? Do you want to just do locals, maybe nationals, and maybe even worlds beyond that? But in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, that near goal is to win the tournament. In casual, you want to build a deck with these 40 cards.
And you want to do that with as few resources as possible. The main resource being money.
And just for another example, like competitive, they want the cards that will give them the better odds and the better chance of winning, whereas a casual player, they want cards that they think is going to be more fun.
And this is where what we will eventually talk about demand. That's how you get the differing demand for certain cards.
But these wands often intersect, and that's especially what I've experienced when I was building my Cosmic Minds deck. But limited resources involve money, cards themselves, and of course we already know efficiency, but that really is just spending the least amount of money possible to build a deck that can either will win or top a tournament, or you'll just have fun in casual play, so that way it's most fair.
So, our first economic concept is scarcity. Scarcity is the basic economic problem that arises because people have unlimited wants, but resources are limited. Now that's from Investopedia.com. What happens is a resource is scarce if it's finite. Examples of scarce resources are time, money, and the trading cards themselves, because they only print so many of each. More scarcity there is, the more expensive it's going to be generally. With the main want in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh being to win, it leads to a want or demand for more competitive cards. Limited amounts of cards are printed, less copies printed. There are less copies printed of higher rarities. So you have different ways that cards become scarce. Over the long term, cards that are no longer printed and have not been reprinted in a while have higher prices because there's less of them around. They get damaged, they get lost. You can't go out and buy them out of off the primary market. So, for example, for that type of example, for not having been reprinted in a while, you have a card called Naturium Beast in Secret Rare. It's still at $13, even though it can only be used in certain decks, and it's not as good in some formats. Now that's because it's harder to get a hold of because its last printing was years ago. For a short-term example, we have something like Link Karibo. It was a Shonen Jump promo, which means you can only get it by having a subscription to Shonen Jump, and even then, only in North America. So that was valued at around $30 on a copy on its release, but the price dropped about $5 when it was recently reprinted as a common and a starter deck Codebreaker. The common only costs about $5, $6 at the time of writing this. The common is way less scarce than the Ultra, and that's why. Because it's way less scarce, it's $5 compared to $25. And these are the cards I was talking about. Just so you can see examples. Why don't you talk about opportunities?
So opportunity cost is basically like the value that of the next highest valued alternative, and use that as a resource. And so we have a couple of examples on the next slide, but they are often weighed in order to attempt to fill as many wants as possible. So let's say, for example,
you have a choice between infinite impermanence or effect.
Right, and so infinite impermanence is an $83 secret rare because there's only one printing and one breaker announced for spring. So an effect veiler is $1.43. It's a common. There have been 11 printings and multiple rarities, but the opportunity cost of an effect veiler is basically
the opportunity cost on the effect veiler is you don't get infinite impermanence and the benefits that come with playing it for effect veiler.
right, and the opportunity cost of permanence as a Dutch failure, and the benefits of having enough money to actually eat or pay rent.
And the reason why we compared these two is they both, similarly, they negate the effect of an opponent's monster, but Infinite Impermanence just does it a little better and is a little bit more protected from other cards, which is what made it more valuable in competitive play, which is another reason why it's $83 compared to $2. And climbing, yes.
Oh, let me tell you which one I picked.
Okay, so supply and demand. This is the big one. Everyone has heard of it. Most people think they know entirely what it means, but there is some nuances to it that actually make it a little complicated. So supply itself is how much the market can offer, while demand is how much the quantity of a product is desired by buyers specifically. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So this goes hand in hand with scarcity. The law of demand is we have a law of demand and a law of supply as well. The law of demand states that, and here comes a wall of definition for you, that if all other factors remain equal, the higher the price of a good, the less people will demand that good. In other words, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. The amount of a good that buyers purchase at a higher price is less because as the price of a good goes up, so does the opportunity cost of buying that good. So because of that, people will avoid buying a product that will force them to forego the consumption of something else they value more, i.e. impermanence and valuing eating enough to stay alive. Less players will buy a card that is more expensive, as I just said. So, for example, the impermanence versus effect failure debate. Less players have purchased play sets of impermanence and effect failure due to the opportunity cost previously discussed. Now, this is where I mentioned about it specifically with buyers. This does not mean that there is less desire to own or play the card. It is a very good card, and I think if everyone had access to it, they would have it. What lower demand means is there's less people willing to pay for it. So, for example, players who will borrow the card for tournaments rather than buying it themselves, they're not contributing to the economic demand because they're not contributing to the interaction and exchanges of goods and services. Casual players definitely are not in the market to purchase cards such as Infinite Impermanence, so no casual players are demanding it, which means there's even less demand for it. Like the law of demand, the law of supply demonstrates the quantities that will be sold at a certain price. But supply has an inverse relationship to demand, and that's what we have over here with this graph right here. It shows, it compares the quantity to the price. And you'll see that as as a higher quantity is demanded, the lower the price. The lower the price, the higher quantity demanded. And the, the higher the price, the more that is supplied. But yeah, the inverse relationship demand. This means that the higher the price, the higher the quantity that is supplied. Producers supply more at a higher price because selling a higher quantity at a higher price increases their revenue. They are incentivized to sell more products, more of a specific card, because they're going to make more money off of it. That's where you see people who've never used eBay in their life go, I have a $120 card, I'm selling that. And then they're figuring it out eBay. Players are more likely to sell cards that are selling for higher prices. This is in layman's terms. Players are more likely to sell cards that are selling for higher prices because they will gain more from the sale and can possibly then buy more cards that are more used to. So let's put that into a practical example of the relationship between supply and demand with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So let's say the market for a specific card is at equilibrium. Let's say that card is Zombie Lake Monster known as Vampire Sucker. There's enough supply of this card to satisfy the demand at the current price. A new structure deck is announced that provides support for the archetype that the card belongs to. This is an actual situation that happened a couple months back when they announced the recent zombie structure deck. The demand for the card spikes in anticipation of the card becoming more competitive because they're going to actually have decent cards to use this card with. Players buy all the copies available for sale because opportunity cost of buying the card decreases. Because they're going to get more out of getting it, they're not seeing it as foregoing as much. Supply can no longer satisfy the demand until the price rises causing more players to want to sell their copies of the card, which creates more supply and less demand, as less players are willing to pay the new higher price. If the supply and demand become equal again, the market for the card returns to equilibrium, and that's when there's enough supply to satisfy the demand, and enough demand to satisfy the supply. I know I went through that a little quick. Does anyone have any questions about that? Do you understand what I'm saying there? There's no dumb questions with this, it can be complicated. Yeah, I tried to put it as layman's terms as possible. So, for example, here's Vampire Sucker. It was around $6 to $8 on release. Once the zombie support was announced, creating a higher demand, the current price is currently about $17. So it jumped about $10. Just because new support was announced. And that's basically what happened. So it just kept rising and rising, and equilibrium was reached at $17.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about incentives, which you mentioned earlier. These are factors that motivate an individual to act in a certain way. So some examples are like sales or store credit that are viewed kind of as kickbacks, and peer recognition, which may cause rarity bumping.
Does anyone here know what rarity bumping is? Yeah, okay, so in an attempt to be flashier and have more peer recognition, oftentimes, and also just to say I have the most expensive or shiniest version of the card, you just get the highest rarity and replace the commons that you had of it. Because cards will often be printed in multiple rarities depending upon what set they get. So that's basically it.
And I'm not going to lie, I did that. Just to make my deck look a little bit better. Just as some examples, so players playing Gold Sarcophagus may pay the extra dollar and pay for like a secret rare of it, as opposed to like commons, because they want other players to see that they have the highest rare copies, as kind of like I'm on a higher playing level than you, but not really. But players are more likely to pay for these expensive cards because they're going to receive, or they may receive, percentage of the purchase in store credit. Like you may get, 5%. You buy a $100 card, you get $5 back of that, or maybe a percentage off on eBay.
Yeah, so you're more likely to spend more on those because it's the difference between buying a $2 card and getting 10 cents back to use in the future, or a $100 card and getting $5. So that's where it incentivizes you. It may not seem like much, but it starts to add up for someone who plays it a lot. Okay, so purchasing power. Purchasing power is basically the value of a dollar. It's the value of a currency expressed in terms of the amount of goods or services that one unit of money can buy. Purchasing power decreases over time due to inflation. Basically, your $10 today will buy less cards tomorrow. The biggest example that people normally like to use for outside of trading cards is today $1 will buy 1 loaf of bread. Next week $1 will buy 3/4 of a loaf of bread because prices go up. So over the time, prices of goods and services increase because inflation is the measure of the rate at which this increase occurs. So as inflation occurs, prices go up, your dollar is worth less. Cards are not immune to inflation. A dollar buys less over time, but purchasing power decreases. Because of this, some cards may hold their value better than cash. Some players may hold on to certain cards in anticipation of a price increase in the future. However, this is not really recommended as card prices can be extremely volatile. Prices may spike or drop depending on changes in the meta, ban lists, etc., where you just really can't predict it because Konami can't even predict what they're going to do next week.
Alright, so now we're at the point that we're just going to tie it all together now. So flooding the market. Flooding the market is an event in which the supply of good increases suddenly or greatly. And this results in price drops based on the lot of demand and decreased opportunity cost. And some examples here, about 2 weeks ago there was an after.
It's about 2 weeks after a product release.
Yes.
That's what it is. Anytime a product releases about 2 weeks later, because people have been tearing open so many boxes and stuff and start selling them, you have a spike in the number of cards that are available to be bought from that set, so their price goes down. Or in the same fashion when special editions of set release. Every time a main core booster set comes out, about 2 months later they release a special edition of it, which has all the same cards, which means even more enter the market, which means the higher supply, which inevitably brings the prices down because sellers can't afford sellers are much more competitive than they can't afford to name higher prices to sell them, or people are just going to buy them somewhere else. That's just how it works. And also, right after the World Championship qualifier season, players who didn't make it to Worlds will start to sell off whatever deck they were playing that season, because they'll do it in anticipation for the meta shift that will inevitably happen throughout the next season. So they don't want to hang on to a deck that there's a good chance will not hold on to its value, so they'll sell a lot of their cards in the anticipation of either getting out of the game entirely or moving on to a different deck, and you get the prices reaching high because they flooded the market. Yeah, we'll go to buyouts. A buyout is an event in which the demand of a good increases suddenly. Results in the purchase of the majority of the available supply. According to Google, in real life, a buyout is the purchase of the controlling share in a company. Think of it as purchasing the controlling share of an individual car. And this happens through the purchase by one or usually multiple individuals. Demand becomes greater than the supply. Remaining suppliers and those who participate in the buyout can now set their own higher price due to less competition. The law of supply dictates that more players will begin to sell because they stand to make a larger profit, which increases the supply until the price spike increases the opportunity cost high enough that demand decreases and the market once again reaches equilibrium and the price stops rising. So basically, demand's so high that more supply, that price will spike because there's not enough supply, as people can afford to be more competitive with their prices. Well, less competitive with their prices, they can set a higher price. So because they can afford this, more people start selling, which means the demand for a short term until the price is too high that the buyers are no longer going to pay a return. But in the short term, you get big price spikes. Now, for example, examples of this include the zombie support buyout I mentioned earlier. It wasn't limited to just Vampire Sucker. It was a lot of zombie support cards that already existed, got bought out, and their prices rose significantly until people got the actual structure decks.
3 hours later.
Certain people decided to play it, other people decided not to play it, so they started selling it. Other fun examples include my friends, including my good friend John here up front, trying to artificially inflate prices by finding a card that no one wants and buying every near mint copy of it online so that people can only get damaged versions. Yep, Phantom of Chaos. He bought all of the great and lightly played and near mint condition cards of it. That was actually, you could call it an effective buyout because over the course of a week, the price did rise by about 25 cents per card on $1 a piece card, or less than that actually.
Well, it varied. It was anywhere from under $1 to just over $5, like a higher end.
Yeah. But overall, the market price of it rose about 25 cents, which was a successful buyout because people started anticipating, could this be utilized in a competitive fashion? Which, given one or two good cards, it could be. Now, not so successful is our collection of Mud Dragon of the Swamps up here, which he also participated in. How'd that go for you, John?
Immensely important.
Yes. So you can't just force other people to think that something is worth their money.
Well, that's the thing too. It was an error on my part because I knew what Dragon was coming out because I watched the OCG trends as well. But there were things you didn't learn because most of their cards are going to be similar to Marvel with some slight differences, except that they get the 4 week. And I had observed that Blood Dragon was seeing quite a bit of competitive play over there, simply because of like the unique aspects of how you can summon it. I happened to work in meta at the time, and I saw that it was getting converted into tins, and it's very cheap for at least because people were chasing more expensive cards in the tins, and therefore a lot of profit being
Also, the card is guaranteed to get it in the tin, which meant the supply was very high and it was very easy to get a hold of, which is what made it cheap.
So what I was attempting to do basically was play penny stocks with it, where I picked up like, I want to say 80 of them for, I only get a quarter piece of them, so it was either like $80, $40, or $20, I believe it was.
Something like that. So congratulations. Every one of you, while supplies last, gets to leave here with a copy of Mud Dragon of the Swamps.
They just kept on cracking those pins to the other cards. That was the error that I made. The supply, the way the supplies that they were, people were just happy to keep buying more pins, and they kept getting more Mud Dragons.
In other words, in other words, he attempted a buyout while the market was being flooded.
Yes.
And that's like trying to swim upstream.
Exactly.
Okay. So. So ban lists, or more formally the forbidden and limited lists, are what Konami puts out every once in a while to rebalance the game. These can have a heavy effect on the prices due to the economic concepts we discussed. Now, just to let you know, we'll have about another like 8 minutes of this, then I'll move it over to questions for y'all. So when a ban is anticipated, prices will decrease due to the possibility of there being an actual ban of it. The price will plummet because if the card is only usable in casual play, then the demand will drop because that's a whole market of people that are no longer willing to buy it. Competitive players aren't going to buy something they can't use. So you will only have demand from casual players who are allowed to play it because they don't have to abide by any rules. Thus, technically, relatively, supply is through the roof. And then the prices become less competitive. No, more competitive. Sorry, more competitive. Yeah, so basically the reason why it'll drop when it's anticipated, even though it hasn't actually been announced to be banned yet, is because the potential opportunity cost becomes too high of keeping the card. Because if it's not able to be played anymore, you have foregone other wants to have that card for it to do nothing for you. And I already explained what happens when a card actually becomes banned. If a card becomes unlimited from being forbidden, which unlimited means you can run it at a full 3 copies in any deck. From being forbidden, it becomes usable in competitive play again, greatly increasing the number of buyers and the demand increases. At this point, a buyout may occur as players snatch up the cheapest copies of the card as the benefits of using the card decrease the opportunity cost. The remaining suppliers increase their prices due to less competition. More players become suppliers as the price increases due to increased profits. Eventually, the price becomes high enough that the opportunity cost of buying the card lowers the demand and equilibrium is reached. So, for examples of all 3 of these,
yeah, this engaging.
Sky Striker, Mobilize, Engage.
It is a great card. It's very
For the past like 3 or 4 ban lists, people have been expecting it to get hit, and it hasn't been hit yet.
right. And so the price decreased from about $90 to $30, making it a lot more affordable.
As low as $30.
Yes.
It fluctuates in between ban lists currently. There was like a 2 or 3 day window where it was as low as $30 because people were so certain it was going to get banned. And then it just shot right back up when it didn't get hit.
Right. And so it's about like $40.
Right now it's about $40.
And then we have Firewall Dragon.
The bane of everyone's existence.
Right. So it dropped from about $15 to about $20 currently, or to about $20, and then right now it's $5, because
It's
on
banned.
MAGFest.
The only reason it's worth as much as $5 currently is because casual players love to play it, because it enables first turn kills, like the devil. And that's why it had to be banned, and it can never, ever, ever come back.
Thank God.
Unless they do what's called a block.
Yeah. The problem with real quick, the problem with Firewall Dragon is its good effect is not once per turn, so they can just keep putting out more monsters and putting out more monsters, putting out more monsters until they just come up with some sort of loop. If you're familiar with programming or anything like that, similar to that, they create a loop where they can just continuously do something until they brought you to 0 life points before you ever even get to start a turn.
And then we have Solemn Judgment, and that was a couple of dollars while it was forbidden, but the day it became limited, the price actually surged from like $17 to about $25, and right now we're at $6.
And that's the whole reaching equilibrium thing. Once all the cards, no one was selling them while it was banned because it wasn't worth selling them while they were banned. They weren't going to make as much money as they wanted to. But some people held on to a lot of copies of those. So as soon as they became unbanned, there was only so few on the market. Price shot up real high. Then everyone started being like, here's all the cards I've been keeping on the back burner waiting to sell when they were good. And that's when everyone was like, there's so many of them, I'll only pay $6. Did you have a question about something?
Prices surging.
Yeah, what happens is I'll tell you when we get through this, remind me, I will bring up tcgplayer.com and I will show you how they handle their prices. They do something similar. Currently, they actually normally have a graph system that shows you how the price has fluctuated over time. Currently, that's down. I think they're doing some updates to it, but normally they have a graph that will track the prices over time to help you figure out maybe there'll be a chance of it going down sometimes.
And you can also use that for combination of people on other sites who like these cards are sold. And then if they like start giving, then
you want to come up here and say, are you front with us at all? No, I'm not insulting you for it. I'm saying you're welcome to. I mean, because if you're contributing good stuff, it's like it'd be a shame for people to not be able to hear you. So just, go ahead. Everyone, this is John Allmiller.
hello. I am also finishing my bachelor's degree of gaming and simulation like Tim has on my last semester of it. And I am very avidly involved in the competitive side of Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. I keep track of price trends constantly just because I try to stay very up to date with the metagame because I'm just involved in it.
And he actually just joined us at the perfect time because he is like our guru that helps us deck build. Now we're going to wrap it all together into efficient deck building. I tried to come up with the best process based on how we've built decks in the past to help you go through it. So the highlighted areas of this are where you would utilize knowledge of the market trends and economics most. So the first thing is you determine your goal. Do you want to play competitively? Do you want to play casually? Do you want to play casually but you want to win? So how competitive or casual do you want to play?
It's so important to have the appropriate goals in mind because you don't want to go out, unless you really want to for some reason spend over $1,000 on a deck just to beat somebody a couple times because you like the cards that you can. It doesn't seem like a very efficient return on your investment.
Rachel, why don't you tell everyone what your goal was when setting that to approach your goal? We'll use her deck that we built as an example because it's kind of middle of the road.
Oh, my goal was 100% to win. But I only wanted to play casual, so I wanted to be competitive enough, and surprisingly, it's gone up against the meta surprisingly won. Like it went up against...
when Trickstar Sky Strikers was the top deck, she managed to beat me while I was playing. So the Trickstar Sky Striker deck I was playing was probably valued at that doesn't mean I paid that much, but valued at about $600. Her deck was valued at about maybe $100.
And she was playing Cosmo Demise.
Yeah, Cosmo.
Yeah, that's
Cosmo Demise. Anyone who doesn't know, Cosmo is a combination of Star Wars and Wizard of Oz. It's
pretty cool.
I am not joking with you.
Yeah.
And I have my deck in case you want to see it.
So then you want to determine your price limit. How much, now you're not going to worry too much about whether you're breaking that or not yet. You just want to make sure you set that in stone early on because you don't want to get carried away. And trust me, it's easy to get carried away.
Yeah, keep within the rough constraints of your initial budget. Said go over by 20 bucks.
Yeah, and that was when we sat down and we said, how much do you want to spend? You said,
Not much.
so we said, okay, 75 to 110-ish. And then you want to pick an archetype or strategy either that speaks to you or will help you fulfill the task, the goal that you had in mind. And it was a little bit of both for me.
Yeah, I really like Star Wars. I have Star Wars tattoo, and I thought, well, what's greater than playing with ships? So I play with a lot of ships because I just really like machines.
Yeah.
But having that archetype is actually pretty fun, and it's really enjoyable for me. Not only to play, but also win.
At this point, this is where you start using the economic concepts and pricing out stuff. You use meta-analyses, online testing, and deck core prices to do this. A deck core is the main grouping of archetype-specific cards for whatever deck you're trying to build.
So like in mine it says like Cosmo.
Like pretty much anything that says Cosmo in its name is the core for her deck. So, and the reason why we say this is part of the times when you look at the economic concepts with it is because you can find that, let's say, my Thunder Dragon deck, its deck core alone is valued currently anywhere from $500 to $700.
Yeah.
Whereas you could get like an Altergeist deck core for like $450.
And it's funny because Altergeist is not necessarily a budget deck, but it's not because of the Altergeist cards. It's actually because of tech cards that synergize with those Altergeist cards.
The infinite impermanence that we mentioned earlier is, if you want to play Altergeist super competitively, pretty much a must-have.
Because they synergize with traps so well. And because it's a trap concept.
Yes. But if you want to play it casually, you can just replace those with different traps that are much cheaper. And that's where you look at those prices like that. Sure. Yeah, it's not necessarily what you need to have, but it's what's included with it. So you may do a slightly different build where you don't actually use all the cards from the core, but it is what is archetype specific.
The other thing with deck cores themselves is I've also seen, yours is definitely a valid definition of it. Another definition, this is more for like when you're deck building so that your deck functions consistently, is basically the ratios of how many cards you're playing that deck is a deck. It can be considered a deck core. This is more for like competitive stuff where based on tournament results, based on what players have done and how they felt things out, they can say, oh, if I'm playing Thunder Dragons, I want 3 of this kind of Thunder Dragon, but only 2 of this one for various reasons. So you could build out that an essential deck core could be something like that that would require fewer copies if you do some more research from like what players have experienced. Whereas like an actual archetype core, I would say it's more your time.
Yeah, basically though, the reason I say archetype card is because that's where you're going to get the first idea of how much a deck is going to cost, is how much the core cards are going to cost.
Yeah.
Then you start creating deck lists. That's when you start making lists of what would go good with that core, the support cards, the tech cards. And by tech cards, I mean stuff that help in certain situations that will help you a lot of the time. And once you create multiple lists like that, you test it until you're satisfied with it. Like, how many hours did you spend testing your build and how many times did you change it?
A lot. We've like 15 times.
And before I even showed that the first one that we changed 4 times to, I had changed it about 9 or 10 times.
Yeah, how about easily?
Yeah. Once you are satisfied with it, that is what is your dream deck. Don't worry about the cost at that point. Just worry about what is the dream deck. Then you price it out, price out your dream deck by card. That's also going to look at the market trends and economics, like how much is it going to cost me? Are any of these going to drop soon? Does it look like? Are any of them on the rise? I need to get them now. That's when you look at that. Then you compare that total cost to the price limit that you set in step 2, and you determine which cards have too high of an opportunity cost for you to get, and to see if they have budget alternatives, i.e. replacing infinite impermanence with effect failure. In most decks you would say, okay, I can get away with that, that'll do all right. Some decks you say, that actually works better because of the fact that it's a late monster synergizes with my deck rather than being a trap card. However, if you were to look at exchanging infinite impermanence with effect failure in like Altergeist, like we said, they synergize with trap cards, you wouldn't really want to do that. You'd probably just replace it for a different trap card altogether. And then you test with your alternatives until you're satisfied. That way, at least, it's kind of like buying a house. I don't know how many people here have seen Property Brothers, where they take them, and the very first place they take them is the house of their dreams. And then they tell them, it's $1.2 million above your budget. Then they go to like 5 or 6, and they look at it and they go, okay, this has some of what I want, but we can make it better, and we can put in the effort to get it to what you want. And that's what you do. You put in the effort with trying out other alternatives that can do similar things until you have something you're satisfied with. And then you can always be cognizant of market influence and shifts to see, oh hey, that card I wanted to before that works better than what I am using as an alternative, its price went down, or it's getting a reprinting and the price is going to go down. I can afford it now. So you can always change it in the future when you have more resources and stuff like that.
Which is currently what I'm biding my time on because while you do have your eggs in a basket for Thunder Dragons, I came to the conclusion that I just did not have the budget requisite to get them as they are. There haven't been any reprints announced in the near future at least, but at some point, they do.
Anything else you want to say about crossing the rebuilding your deck? Because I know we went with effect your deck. There was no effect failure? Okay, I think we did that in one of the testing once we got into some of that. But
it was a little frustrating at first to, this was like my first like real deck. So it was, I just remember it being hard, one, to find an archetype, and then two, sticking on Grace Ring. So I do have a lot of budget alternatives, but they worked pretty well. We had to get a little creative with that, and to try to make it at least competitive. So.
Yeah, what is known as a road deck. A deck that can do well against meta-defining decks, but isn't one of the top meta-defining decks. And sometimes it's known as anti-meta, where it's built specifically to have an advantage over the meta decks. But it doesn't have as much of a well-rounded benefit against a lot more decks, just those specific top cards.
But that's the interesting thing actually with Thunder Dragon. It has technically worked its way now into being because it and Skystrikers are the two most represented. But Thunder Dragon started out as an anti-meta deck, mainly because a lot of what the deck did happened to hard counter what was in the metagame at the time. Because in Yu-Gi-Oh! The metagame has, for the past 2 years, been all about how consistently can you get to the cards that let you win the game. And Sky Striker was on top because the deck was extremely consistent because of that engage card we showed you a bit ago. It lets you search for any Sky Striker card in your deck, so you can toolbox the answer and make the problem. Thunder Dragon's been stops you from
However, I hate to cut you off, but we need to move on to questions because we're running out of time. So, the big thing to remember is to have fun, and remember, MST does not negate.
You guys aren't supposed to know what that means.
So, and we'll bring it down to questions. Does anyone have any questions for us? And while take the questions while I bring it to CC.
Yes, go ahead. I see. That's a question that I get asked quite a bit because a lot of my friends at one point or another, Tim as well, were out of the game for ages from like the first or second generation. I will tell you, there is a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning that you have to get past because it's funny, I tell people this all the time. I used to be able to teach somebody how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Start to finish in about 15 minutes, but as time's gone on, Konami is just added new components to the game, and that as a result makes things more complicated. So it's more, you have to learn what the new kind of cards that exist are. Like the original rules are still in place. They've adjusted some things with like minutia of how attacking works has gotten a little more complicated, but for the most part they try to keep those rule changes to a minimum. It's mostly getting used to, oh, it's not just this monster spell trap, now there's all these kinds of monster cards now, and you can summon them in different ways. So
one of the other
it requires catching up, but it's doable. It's just, it's a lot of information, but it's not, I would say, especially difficult.
One of the other benefits is Konami has gotten a lot better at making what the cards do more effectively communicated to players. One of the ways they did this was, I believe it was in 2011, 2014, when they implemented problem-solving card text.
I think it was 2011.
2011. It used to be when the cards came out, they would literally write the effects on them on a whim, however they wanted to word it.
Based on what they read off of the Japanese translation.
And then people would argue about whether or not something was a cost or an effect or a condition to activate it. They would argue about that. So they changed it to problem-solving card text, where every effect is written in, if it does it in a certain way, it's written exactly the same on no matter what card it is. So that you always know things such as, if it's before a semicolon, that's the condition you have to meet to activate it. Well, not the condition, that's the cost you have to pay to activate it. If it's after a semicolon, that's what happens on resolution and stuff like that.
If you're not used to that, it can sound a little bit bureaucratic in complaints, but it's really nice for like basically sorting out those kinds of rules and disputes. Because once you learn how the problem-solving card text works, it's actually fairly intuitive.
It's nice because it removed exceptions. There's no longer exceptions to the rule. So instead of English, it is now more like Spanish.
It's actually good.
Yes.
English is the
So I saw a question. So to take the first part of your question, older cards, middle generation, they're in like two baskets because they had a lot of cards that did like nothing. So they're useless nowadays and they're worth nothing. Unless they have some sort of nostalgic value to the anime, like original Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician. However, they also weren't as concerned about limiting their effects back then because they didn't have so much power creep, as we say in card games a lot, where they keep kind of like Dragon Ball Z syndrome, where they keep upping the ante on what the cards can do. So because they didn't have to worry about other cards interacting to do a lot of stuff, they have much simpler effects. Case in point, a card called Raigeki literally just says destroy all monsters on your opponent's field.
Yep. Because they wanted to keep them simple.
Because they wanted to keep it simple back then. Because of that, its value is a lot higher in competitive play, and it's limited to one copy. Because if everyone had 3 copies, it would just be, oh, you built a board, and it's gone. Yeah. Oh, you built a board, and it's gone.
It's funny you say that, Tim, but cards like Evenly Matches now do Raigeki's job a little bit better in a lot of cases. So it is. However,
if you look at Evenly Matched, it has 2 limitations.
Yes.
Unlike Raigeki. Raigeki had no limitations. Yep. Evenly Matched is a card that, first off, has to be activated at the end of the battle phase. That's the only time it can be activated.
In other words, you don't get to attack.
And your opponent has to have more cards than you. And the more cards they have than you, the more it hurts them. So, what they do is they banish cards from their field until they have as many as you do.
And if nobody knows, banishing is much worse than just destroying cards.
And that's a comparison between the old school Raigeki and old school Evenly Matched. There's a lot more conditions on it.
I can tackle the second half of this question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, yeah, you were talking more about like the old anime cards holding their value. Yeah, cards like that, especially while they don't see much as far as competitive play, these cards do, I've seen at least, hold their value simply because of people liking anime, and it's that casual drive for it, because that's the thing. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Economy, while it is heavily driven by competitive trends, there is still a casual factor there, and it's sort of like, it goes into basically a collector factor at that point too, because people like those same cards. Interesting things that happen sometimes is whenever Konami goes back to revitalize an old archetype of cards, like when Blue Eyes got their support a couple of years back, they wanted to make Blue Eyes competitive. So because of that, Blue Eyes White Dragon got, at the time, it's been a little bit power crap now because things just get better every time they're a business. They have to keep releasing new cards otherwise for you to buy, and if they're not better than the previous ones, nobody will buy them. But they wanted Blue Eyes to be competitive, so because of that, the casual and competitive audiences were both interested in it, and that made certain prices of Blue Eyes cards just skyrocket.
So, as an example, here's Blue Eyes White Dragon's market price. Now this shows them by printing. This one is the newest printing.
So one that sexy Blue Eyes?
Yes, and it's 85 cents. This one was a common. Now you get down to the original starter deck Kaiba. Yeah, ultra rare, 11.35 the copy.
Yep.
Now that's for a near mint copy.
Yeah.
Now that's the market price, but if you look, you also have all these damaged copies, because that's where we also said about the supply being lower after a long period of time, which is why the price went up. Because no one who got their cards when they were 12 put them in sleeves and kept them protected. So you have even less copies of them. Yeah, and then you see that all the prices range very much so because of that. So you have like a $2.02 from the 2016 Megatons. No, it'll be listed and it'll say does not have any listings. No, so I'll push it back there.
Let's say I want to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh, but I just want to play casual with friends on Saturday night. They're like how was the bulk market? Like maybe I just want to buy a bunch of cards and build that.
I don't necessarily recommend buying like lots on eBay because you never know what you're going to get or if any of it can even be used together. My best suggestion to you is find a structure deck that comes out that you like the mechanics of it. Buy 3 of it. That's $30. They retail for about $10. Now you have 3 of each card in it. So now you can play with the ratios of the cards and create a deck that you like. It will have a working strategy because it's built to be that way. And you can play around with it, and as you get new cards, you can swap some out in there, and you can improve on it. I have actually up here, before we started, I beat her deck that beat my my top tier meta deck a couple months back. I beat her with a $40 structure deck I built.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to what kind of good matchups you have, and it really comes down to what are you going to have fun.
Yeah.
So you look at the structure decks. Read it. There's a lot of reviews online of if you just search individual structure decks of what they do, what their strategies are.
What the art looks like, which is
and then that'll help you figure out something you might enjoy.
Yeah.
I think we're a little over time, but I'll take one more question. All right. Well, thank you all so much for all we do. Did you have one?
It was never something that had to do with the power creep, I will say that. Well, no, actually, I shouldn't say that. Usually what will happen if they have, emergency bans are very rare in Yu-Gi-Oh! Something has to be like grossly out of place for them to emergency ban it, because usually ban lists will come out at, they used to come out at exactly set times. We would get, a few years back, this ban list will be available on this exact day, and it will last for this exact time frame. But now they've gotten more flexible with it because they wanted to avoid having to do emergency ban lists. So they will say, this ban list will be around no sooner than this point, but could be out then or anytime later.
All right, guys. Just finish your sentence.
Yeah. So as far as the emergency banning thing goes, it's usually newer cards that they didn't account for being as powerful as they were, but occasionally a new theme will cause an older card to be really powerful because of how they work in combination, and because they want to sell new product, they'll ban the old card instead because that's how they get the money. That would be one of those corner cases, but it does happen.
But thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Please feel free. Thank you so much. Feel free to come up and claim your free copy of Blood Dragon of the Swamps.